And yes, live is now, now is live. The word is love, and love is the word. So it says yes. Good now to you. We are here on This Week in Amplio. My name is Ryan Erickson, host of Riffing with Ryan, which is kind of how these things connect. And I am here with one of my dear friends now, as we've come to know each other over time, Mr. Al Shalloway. I'll bring Al Shalloway out of the penalty box and onto stage. Hello.
Hi
Al.
there.
So we had tearing down limiting beliefs as the label on the bottle for this week. And in just the last couple minutes, there's some spice we may be adding to that particular soup bottle, whatever you want to drink with it. And I would enjoy going wherever it is you wish to go, whether it was the post you put out there or whether it was this, I will say, a dangerous conversation that you wanted to have. So welcome here, and where would you like to go?
Well, let me just kind of say it maybe in a more positive way. Admittedly, I get my feathers ruffled. I was going to say my ruffles feathered, but I mean my feathers ruffled. I think there is a real challenge in the industry, and I think the challenge is people aren't being educated properly. It's expensive to get the level of education you need to be a competent agile team lead or coach or consultant. And I mean, I think ongoing education, be clear, I'm talking about ongoing education.
Yeah.
When somebody goes into a company to do some specialized training where you're only training 20, 30, 40 people, that's expensive because it's people's time and these guys are really good at what they do. So I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about when you have kind of a private workshop for a special reason to kick things off. That's expensive training. It just is. There's not much you can do about that because there's no leverage to the cost. But imagine if ongoing training, if we just had people actually continuously learn, and imagine if the cost of that could be low in time and dollars. In time by being more effective, and in dollars by just costing less. Like, and I mean 90% less. I don't mean 10% less. Okay. Yeah. Imagine what it would be like if we knew what to do. And I wrote a post this morning about, like, Deming talks about this a lot, that doing your best is great, but if you don't know what to do, it doesn't matter. That the world is being ruined by people doing their best. And I see Agile, I think, is being ruined by people doing their best. And there's some mantras that keep that in place. This it's okay to fail. It's okay to have to run experiments it's okay to have to run experiments when you really don't know what to do and there's nothing to guide you. But let me tell you, I haven't had to do this that much over the last years, decades. And the reason is not because I have so much experience, because I wasn't running them a lot when I didn't have a lot of experience. What I knew, though, was the physics of flow, as I've heard it called. And you can tell what to do. See, every time I put somebody said, well, it's always an experiment. If I put my cup down on my desk here, that ain't an experiment. It's on the desk. It's not going to fall off. Okay, yeah, I'll look to make sure I put it on the desk right. That's feedback. I'll do that. It'd be stupid to put it where I think the desk is, not look at it, make sure it's on the desk and let go. But there's no way in hell that's an experiment. I'm sorry, not everything is an experiment. And yes, you always want feedback. Yeah. So these mantras, management doesn't understand, or they don't have the agile mindset. Well, that's a great attitude to have, maybe. It doesn't tell you what to do. And the principles in the Agile Intentionally Manifesto aren't telling you what to do. This guidance has proven to be insufficient, and people aren't acknowledging it. A lot of people aren't acknowledging it, and maybe fear. People are getting scared of their jobs. I think that's probably a good thing.
Which jobs do you think they're getting scared of? Who's getting scared of which jobs?
Well, if I was a Scrum Master who wasn't seriously top of the game, virtually a training level person, I'd be scared of my job. I'd say it's going to get a lot worse than it is right now. People have been kind of trying to deny that there's even a problem. Oh, no, it's just a slowdown. This is natural in the industry. No, bullshit. Yeah. It's not that. It's a serious problem. And I'll tell you why it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse for two main reasons. The bloom is off the rose, so to speak. Yeah. I'm sorry. Hang on one second.
Sure. This is what's called tension. So this is a cliffhanger. The bloom is off the rose.
Okay, that was all. The Agile movement. No, some people walked in or making noise outside my office.
Right.
Well, no, there is a bloom off the rose. People are now thinking, well, Agile's not quite producing the results we wanted.
Yeah.
And instead of blaming, not blaming, I don't look for blame, but take responsibility that
Yeah.
maybe we're not teaching managers, maybe we're not teaching executives what's needed. We're blaming them for not knowing, which is ridiculous because most coaches I know don't know a clue about systems thinking and what executives should be doing and value stream management and how you start things up at the front. But
Or
anyway,
managing a business or the financial
yeah.
flows and the holistic view of actually what product development is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so what if they did know? Because it's not unknowable. There's this talk, though. This is another thing. Oh, well, you got to follow till you understand and you need years of experience. And I say, no, that's wrong. You need to do it to truly understand it. But you don't need years of experience if somebody gives you guidelines on it. And it's like, look, I learned design patterns. It took me a while to learn design patterns reading the book. And I didn't really understand it until I did it.
And were you talking about the design, the Christopher Alexander?
No, not that design. Sorry. The design patterns, elements, the design patterns book by the Gang of Four back in the mid-90s.
Software design patterns. Okay.
Yeah, software design patterns. And I remember reading about it and thinking, oh, that's cool. I think I understand. But until I did them, I didn't understand them. I remember I actually got composite and decorator wrong at first. Oh, that's what they mean. Okay, now I got it. But let me tell you, by them and actually Alexander's work, which was about patterns, providing the insights, I learned something in a matter of weeks that would have taken me years to do on my own. And so this lack of theory, this lack of the physics of flow, as I've heard it called once, and I've borrowed that, is missing mostly in our space. And
in our space again, and
I mean,
I think this is even a bigger space again beyond software development. But
improving business, the space of improving business, improving teams, having people be more effective. It's all related. It's all interrelated. You can't separate them all. They're all related. So, when you look at the core issue of it, it's people don't know what to do when they should. And the idea of this, we've been poisoned in the space in a sense about complexity. Yeah, it's complex. But you know what? That doesn't really matter. Is there a well-defined way that you can steer in a complex situation? And the answer is yes. And that it combines two things. One is an attitude of what Ellie Goldratt calls inherent simplicity, that there are a few things guiding all this. Goldratt's the theory of constraints guy. So those few things are what you can use to look at, see where your constraints are. And the other thing is quick feedback. So you can see how you're learning. See, this is the misunderstanding. He doesn't say that we can see all these things. That took me a while to understand. No, he's not saying we can see it all and understand it. Some people have attacked him for saying, oh, that's old school, thinking you could figure it all out. And the answer is, he never said you can see them all. He said there just are a few. So then the question is, how do you unobscure them? Because complexity obscures them.
And how does each individual engage in their practice of whatever that is in practice together to uncover what is in the way between what is agreed upon as the goal to deliver the product that is requested and needed by the market? I think steering is a whole other thing.
That's a great question.
Where steering happens, but it's that what are our practices and just, oh, well, let's just do an experiment. Let's figure out. I have no idea what the market wants or anything like that. But that's that is it. But that is a knowable thing, and that I think we've talked about this several times. That it is just outside your knowability, and that if you have some the knowing can happen. So maybe that's a different take of what we're trying to say.
No. This is you're in stream with us. There are two things you brought up that are very important. One is you've got all these different levels of people, and they see different things, and they have different level of agency. The ability to do things, and how do they interact? And this is a very complex situation. And how do you look at it? And there are two things you need to look at this well. One is systems thinking, and the other one is again the feedback, understanding how systems work, understanding these inherent simplicity that Goldratt talks about, that is about finding out what these rules of flow are. Now, they're not that hard to learn. I mean,
Yeah.
it's now the thing is, then what you have to do is, if you understand them and you see people who don't understand them, then you have to talk to them about them understanding, because all this is verifiable with your own eyes and your own experience, your own and sometimes that experience is tacit. In other words, you have to have it elucidated, or what's the word, brought forth,
articulated. You know what you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. I think that's kind of
well,
the
you
thing that we talked
sometimes
about.
know
You
things
don't
you
know
don't
what you
know you
know.
know.
Yeah,
and
which is fun. I want to go back just a little bit in terms of the inherent simplicity. I don't know
yeah
that we've actually gone to say to what is that in this principle, the single
okay.
principle. I guess the first
Yeah,
principle.
so this Goldratt talks about this. He says that at the root core of things, there are only a few things that are driving everything. Cause and effect are driving everything. Now, this is one of the misunderstandings of complex systems. There is cause and effect in complex systems. It's just so intertwined you can't see it. And some people think that, well, then you can only see it after the fact. And that may be true, to see all the different cause and effect after the fact. While it's going on, you can't see it. But there are two things, there are three kinds of, I'll suggest, complex systems. And we need to make a distinction between the three. One is something like weather, which is just something that happens to us. Okay, we have no control over it. It just happens, and we want to see and make predictions and all that. By the way, our ability to predict a complex system of weather is much, much better than it used to be. So years back, decades back, the best way to predict the weather was to say tomorrow is going to be as good as today, is going to be the same as today. That was basically the best way to do it, because we didn't have any way to figure it out any better than that. And they usually repeat a little bit. Now we do much better, not perfectly, because it's a complex system and we can't figure it out and we have no control over it. Now, there's another type of system where we have agency, like a nuclear reactor. Okay, now those are complex. There's no question they're complex. The interactions are such, but a lot of them, the real damage isn't the complexity. And this is almost a lesson unknown in the agile space, which shocks me. I've been writing about this for years. It's not complexity that kills us anyway. It's chaotic events. One little thing happens and blam.
So that's the surprise. I think we're talking about that
Surprise.
the non-linearity. I think we talked about
Non-linearity.
that.
Look at what happened at 3 Mile Island. Look at what happened at Chernobyl. Chernobyl had a bad design. It turns out that the reason Chernobyl exploded was the way it was designed to put the rods in to cool things down, actually raise the temperature for a moment, and then it goes down. It's just the way they designed the damn thing. But you had to be in a situation where that would make a difference. The best example of chaos theory that I know, this is where people talk about a butterfly in Asia causes a tsunami or something. But here's a great example. And if you Google seconds from disaster, the Piper Alpha, this was a North Sea drilling rig that blew up and killed, 150 people or something. And it was a combination of a lot of things. They were doing maintenance on a pump, and they stored the paperwork on it in separate places. So they didn't know that they shouldn't try to bring it online. It caused a gas leak. So that was one thing that happened. Basically, paperwork in the wrong place, you could say, caused it. But I think what's really interesting is there's another reason it all blew up. And that's because there was a place that when they had leaks, it would fall into the gas, the liquid propane would fall into the water. So yeah, you'd have a fire and it would be a disaster and it'd be all that bad. So the fire happened because of the paperwork being placed the way they did their system. By the way, this was a system error. Nobody made a mistake. This was a system they had. This is the thing that's missing. Systems cause these things. And then what happened, though, interestingly enough, there was a grid on the stairwell outside that goes down to the water. And I don't know if you've ever been on these places around water. They're often metal grids, and if you're barefoot, they hurt your feet.
And sidewalks as you walk.
No, it's not a sidewalk. It's a metal lattice kind of thing. So it's It doesn't
Okay.
cut your feet, but it's extremely uncomfortable on your feet. It's like if
Okay.
you ever walk over a subway vent, like that. It's like a vent with shoes on. It's no big deal, but barefoot, it doesn't feel so great.
Yeah, bad deal.
Well, the scuba divers who do maintenance around the platform, they put a rubber tarp on top of that so they could get all their gear and not have to be sitting on this metal grid because that was uncomfortable. So when the liquid propane leaked out because of the other errors, it accumulated on this on this mat they put down. Otherwise, it would have fallen into the ocean and just had fires. They could put the fire out, shut everything down. But that caused it to accumulate, cause a fire, and then above that there was another pipe that then exploded and blew up the whole thing. The point is, the cause and effect was all there. You could see the events after they happened. You might have been able to even see the events while they happened, but you couldn't do anything. Why? Because it's physical. 3 Mile Island, they had a problem with a valve. Nobody could go in there and fix it, even if they knew it was a problem, but they didn't know it was a problem. Why? Because it's physical. So that's the second type of complex system.
And that's a fault in the design process. And there was
That
maybe
was a fault. There was
some observation that was missed in terms of this is not about a surprise in the whole process of the design, but this is about a flaw in the design because
it was
whatever
also
principle wasn't.
it was also a flaw in design, but those things are going to happen. So complex systems, sometimes we can't do anything about it. Sometimes there's a flaw in the design that when it happens, there's nothing we can do about it because it's physical. So yeah, these things typically happen with flaws in design, things like that. But knowledge work is different. And people haven't talked about this. In fact, people talk about when they talk about complex systems, you talk about things like weather, things like animal behavior, things like these physical things. Well, that's not what knowledge work is about. Knowledge work, you can get feedback instantly if you set it up to get feedback instantly. You can see what's going on and you can change what's going on if you prepare yourself for it. So I suggest that this idea that we have to run experiments because we can't tell what's going on is totally wrong. Now, sometimes it might happen. So maybe not totally wrong. How about 98% wrong? And I'm not saying you don't get feedback. Somebody once said, oh, that's not an experiment then if you're not getting feedback. Damn straight it isn't. I'm driving my car and I see a lane to my right and I want to move into the right lane and I decide I'm going to go into the right lane. That's not an experiment. I'm changing lanes. Am I getting feedback to make sure nobody gets into my lane? Absolutely, I'm looking.
You're observing, you're seeing, you're using the patterns of preparation that you already had. I learned how to drive a car.
That's right.
I practiced how to drive a car and I've gotten better and better and better at it. So, one of the, as an intermediate driver on the road, you learn how to look at the mirror, looking back and change lane.
Right.
And the simple practices and processes that you use that you can navigate a system. And
that's right.
Again, I think the other part of it now, and maybe you're getting into now, what are the thinking patterns that need to be in place?
I'm actually not going to go quite into that detail, but let's look at the difference between driving a car and knowledge work in a sense. Well, driving a car, you can pretty much see things there. You do sometimes have blind spots, but they're pretty much the same. Like I've learned where my blind spots are. I'm a little older. My neck's not quite as flexible. I use my mirrors and things like that. I've got a Mercedes A220. I love the car. And one of the things, it saved me about 3 or 4 accidents. I got to admit, I'm driving along and I'm about to change lanes and I hear this beep, 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 beep. And I look a little more careful and oh my God, I could have hit that guy. I've been driving it for a couple of years. I don't get into accidents. I actually haven't gotten into an accident, but I got to admit, that's an example of the system changing to help me. So the creators of the car, and this is not unique to Mercedes. A lot of cars do this now, but I'm not self-driving, by the way. I'm just driving. This is just what it does. It's paying attention. One time I almost hit somebody backing out of a parking deck and the brakes come on automatically. I say, oh, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Why? Because those things happen. So
they're assistive tools that are built to help you navigate and engage in the environment more effectively because some patterns and of how the environment works. So
now knowledge work is even more complex. So I know that this is not saying you could figure it all out and see that all. But it's, if you accept that there is cause and effect there, and if you accept that we can't see it all, which is obvious. Now, again, in a nuclear reactor, you can't see it all, and when you see it, it's too late. But in knowledge work, if you don't see it all, then the question is, how do you see it in time? And then the question is, what's in time mean? In time means that you can make a change without it being costly. Now, that has a lot to do with your system. In other words, if you've got automated testing and you make a change and the automated testing helps you make the change with confidence, then in time is when it happens. You can just adjust to it. If you're building incrementally and getting quick feedback from customers, then in time means I'm not wasting a lot of time with things. So inherent simplicity, this idea that there are things with cause and effect, acknowledging we don't see everything and using feedback such that we can, means that what we want to do is recognize it's there and we have to discover it, and we have to use theory. I've talked about this before with Semmelweis is a great example of when you don't have a theory of understanding, people resist, people don't understand, it takes them longer to learn. And we don't have this theory. We've been satisfied with just some principles. Sorry, yeah, go.
Well, no, but I think we're talking also, there's this difference in a human system of people in relationship with one another with differing levels of mastery, with different awarenesses of what a particular complicated piece of software is. And if you've got a senior architect working on this stuff, I've seen these things. These are patterns that I know and have experience with, where a junior developer wouldn't know if they were solo looking at that piece of that problem, that challenge. There would be all sorts of unpredictability because they don't have the level of mastery and familiarity with that complicated environment that have those defined cause and effect relationships. And then the surprise happens when, okay, we're gonna take this piece of this artifact that's been built based on some principles, based on theory of what's going to happen in the market. We release that into that world of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and spirit of human beings interacting with that to get surprise, what you're saying. That's where you get the feedback, where that potential surprise is, and then what you have built to assist your ability to take that change back and do it. And then this is the whole CI/CD thing. This is how robust and resilient is your system and software environment.
The reason I was chuckling when you started this is there's this huge irony in the Agile space. Agile is supposed to be about people. Would you agree Agile is about people? It's about respecting people, about trusting people, about paying attention to people.
It's about that more than what it was prior to the world.
People over process, things like that.
Yeah, totally.
Agile is not very sensitive to people, in my opinion. It says to be sensitive to people, but it isn't. And why do I say that?
Yeah, what piece of that do you mean? Yeah, can you say?
Well, I don't mean Agile. So here's the thing. I'm a believer in what's so, not what's supposed to be so. This is called de facto versus de jure. What's so, not what's supposed to be so. I'm a believer in that. That's empiricism. I'm a big believer in empiricism. You don't look at what's supposed to happen. Like Scrum is, in my opinion, a theory about if you do this, it'll work. It's just a theory. And they never evaluate it. Well, let's use the empiricism. Is it working? Is it not working? Is Agile working? Is it not working?
Yeah.
So what's so about people is you look out there, and I'm not talking about the manifesto. You can go back and hold on to the manifesto all you want to. I'm talking about what's happening in the world, what's come out of that. And what's come out of that is you have things like, well, here's a method and you should apply it. And it's kind of forced on people. And even if people decide to do Scrum, there's a lot of things you have to do. Same thing with SAFe, with all this stuff. It's like, okay, here's what you're going to do. Instead of noticing that if people don't understand why they're doing, what's the intention, and they don't understand why what they're being told to do will actually work, they will resist it. They will learn slowly. They are under pressure. This is being sensitive to people. Recognize that people are under pressure. And then if you give them something and it's going to make their job harder for a little while, which is another myth, it doesn't have to make it harder. Does not have to be a J-curve. See, J-curve was a great thing for family. I love Virginia Satir and her work. And she was doing family therapy. And if you're starting to talk to your loved ones and family in a different way and bring up issues that have been kind of buried and walked over, of course there's going to be upset. Of course, there's going to be a problem. And somebody decided, let's apply this to how we learn. And then they made it inherent. It's inherent maybe in family relationships. It's not inherent in business. It's not inherent in learning. But yeah, it happens. So we look around and say, oh, yeah, that's the way it is. But you know what? Back in the 19th century, it was known heavier than flight, heavier than air flight was impossible. Why? Because nobody had done it. Everything is impossible until somebody does it. The 4-minute mile was impossible until somebody did it. Anyway, my point is this. Let me bring this to a close and then talk about what those 3 things we said we talk about, because it's actually very important as well. Agile has, unfortunately, and I'm not judging the manifesto in the sense of was it right or is it wrong, or should we keep to it or not keep to it? Yeah, I have my opinions about that. They're probably well known, but that's irrelevant. What's relevant is if you believe that systems thinking is important, and I do, there's a lot of evidence and you can start looking for it. And if you want to know what I mean by system thinking in depth, go to my website, successengineering.works, and there's a button on the right called resources. And from there, you can take the YouTube playlists and you'll see a bunch of playlists. And one of them is Amplio Foundations. And I have an hour seminar on systems thinking. I have another hour on factors for effective value streams, which is kind of the basis of I talk about in all this inherent simplicity. I mean, I've got like a day out there free. Just study it. That's all it'll take to get these ideas totally across. When you recognize that it's there, it's kind of like this. Let's say you're on a ship and it's leaking water, and you know this is a problem, and you see where it's coming in from here and from there. So you fix that break in the hull, and it's still leaking water. Well, okay, I know because I have. See, now notice it's still leaking, but have I improved things by eliminating one of the leaks? Yes, I have. Not enough. So I go over to this other leak and I fix it. And I'm surprised now that I'm still getting water in the hull, in the boat. What the hell is going on? I fixed that. Notice both of those improve things. They didn't stop the problem. Why? Because there's something I can't see, but now I know I can't see it. See, that thing I can't see, that's like a metaphor for that's what complexity does for us. But now we know to look for it. And very often in the real world, when you do something and it causes something else and now you see it, or unobscures. See, we want to unobscure. I know that's a funny word, but there's complexity obscures, and now we're unobscuring with feedback. When you get to this point, you start seeing things. Okay, so I want to switch to these 3 things, giving this, because I'm a big believer in this. I'm a big believer in looking at the past, finding what works, and then making it an explicit process. And I don't see people doing this too much. And that is a serious issue in my mind, because there's so much that we know how to do. And I want to be really clear about this. I'm not saying I have the answer. No, I have an answer. But I've listed on my website, I'm always talking about a half dozen other people who've got full-blown processes and methods, and any way you want to look at it. Okay. None of them, by the way, are frameworks. I think frameworks, that's a side issue. That's not what I'm going to get into right now. So one thing is just like I want to make sure I guide this right. So let me.
And we're going to go into the 3 topics we advertised.
Yeah, we're going to go into those because they illustrate this. I don't want this to be a theoretical. What the hell is he talking about? That's interesting, but no. What I want to look at here then is what I mean by this. So one of the topics here is about running experiments. I'm going to say it says how to quickly diagnose challenges. Okay. So the thing about diagnosing challenges is there's actually something interesting here. Diagnose challenges. Why do I need to diagnose challenge? I'm following this framework that's going to solve all my problems. See, diagnosis it's amazing to me that almost nobody acknowledges that diagnosing what your problem is before you figure out what the solution is should be done. Scrum doesn't diagnose. SAFe doesn't diagnose. Kanban, I can kind of forgive for not diagnosing, because with Kanban method, you can at least start where you are and slowly doing things and avoid the diagnosis. But let me tell you, it's really good if you know what the hell's going on and if you know what's wrong. And it's not that hard to do. how do I know it's not that hard to do? Well, because I've done it for years. And where did I learn how to do it? Well, this is another interesting thing with systems thinking. About, I think it was around 2007, 2008, when I was at Net Objectives. We had some really top consultants. We discovered, more than one of us, we kind of came up to this independently of each other. And yes, that was a symptom of bad collaboration. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. You know, I wasn't always running it perfect. Somebody came up with it before me, and when I described it to him, he said, "Yeah, you knew that." And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" But what we both had noticed,
knowledge is power.
Sometimes smart minds, they just like to do it themselves. And he was great. He was amazing, but he didn't always share everything until you asked him. Anyway, what we noticed, he and I noticed independently of each other, was that most companies have the same problems. And most cures are different because of the context of the company, but conceptually the cure was the same, like getting feedback, working on small things, knowing what's really of value to your critical stakeholders, things like that. So I don't know, it was around 2008, 2009, after discovering this. Well, I discovered this, I immediately started working, can I codify this? Because I was a believer, am a believer, that you can codify these patterns, like what to look at, not like do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, but what are these things Goldratt was talking about, that a few things, maybe if I could look at those few things. So the Amplio system that we have now that we teach in the ACE program has what I call GPS. It shows you the whole system. It's a view of the entire organization, every part of the organization. It's a way to do a diagnosis by looking for symptoms, problems, and how to interactively come up with things. And then there's a relationship between what causes, like low prioritization, difficulty in prioritization. What causes that? Or people are getting interrupted. What causes that? Or you know, teams aren't properly organized. How do you fix that? Or, you know, what's the symptom of all these things? And the cause and effect isn't like this to this exactly, but it's not as complicated as thousands of potential problems and solutions. This is where the patterns come in. So quickly diagnosing challenges is something you can do when you learn this. Now, I know this is going to sound like, I don't care if it sounds like a marketing spiel. It's going to be a marketing spiel in some sense, because I want to give a scale to what I'm talking about. And you don't have to come to me. People, you know, I've mentioned people like this, you know, Peter Merrill, Wolfram Mueller, Steve Tendon. You know, I just got back in touch with Dennis Stevens, you know, Mike Kottmeyer of Leading Agile. There are any number of people. I forget his name. The guy does, you know, the team Fast Agile.
Ron Quartel.
Yes, thank you. Brilliant guy. I mean, his thing isn't not universal, but where it works really well. So, but see, I'm committed to lowering education. So I have a 6-month program that's $1,000, and this is live training. This is not, and it covers about 120 hours. I don't expect anybody to do it all. The intention is to, how do you learn on an ongoing basis? I'm just saying that, just mention that what I'm talking about is not this years and years and years and very expensive thing to learn. They're just a few things when you get your hands on. And when you're put in a system that gives you support, it's not that difficult. So this is the first key, is how do we discover these things? What's possible is my question. So then I'm thinking, okay, running experiments to have to see what to do. Well, I've not had that experience. And I've done some very unique things. There have been times where I was in a situation, this was back 2008 to 2011, say. There were several times where I was in a situation where they had a problem. I had seen things a little bit like it before, but had never seen it exactly like this. And in a 1 or 2, 3-day discussion with the people there, figuring out, pretty much always using value stream analysis of some sort. Value streams are, of course, a metaphor. It's not always linear or anything like that, but you're looking for flow and things of that nature. We came up with a suggestion, you know, jointly. What typically would actually happen, to be candid, I would see it before they would, but I wouldn't tell them. And the reason,
you've matured since then.
I don't tell them. I still don't tell them, because you know what? If you tell them, they haven't worked through it. It's like the monarch butterfly getting out of the cocoon. If you take a monarch butterfly and get them out of the cocoon while they're struggling, they will die.
It's the dependency thing. I understand.
They have to work through the issues themselves, or when things start going wrong, they won't know what to do and I won't be around. Then they'll blame me. It didn't work. And they should blame me because I didn't let them see it themselves. So the way I coach is I often see it before them. Not always. I've had sometimes other people figure it out before me, but most of the time I do see it before. Why? Because I've got more experience. I'll see it, but then I will ask questions and I will point out, teach something. I might teach some little theory or some little practice and let them piece it together themselves. Not like, oh, you should put this over there. No, that is telling. But if you ask questions, you can get access to their tacit or ambient knowledge. Tacit knowledge is what they know, but they don't know they know it. Intuition, you might say. When you get a eureka moment, tacit knowledge just became surface. Ambient knowledge is, oh, that's kind of like this, and I know how to do that, and so now I'm close. Ambient. So that's how I guide them through that process, and then when they get there, they understand. This is 2 or 3 days. This isn't 2 or 3 years. Not even 2 or 3 weeks. And the point is that when I've done this, virtually every time, it was the right process. Now, there's another aspect. Why didn't it always work? Actually, it's worked like 90%. But why? What's with that 10%? Well, it's because sometimes people really don't want to change. That's rare, but it happens. Most of the time, people want to change when they understand why change would be beneficial. And this kind of process can get them. So you have to attend to people this way. And you have to let them figure it out, but you don't let them figure it out on their own. That's absurd. You let them figure it out by guiding them, by asking questions. I learned this from a coach I had myself, a business coach back in 86, 87, 88, somewhere in the 80s. Really brilliant. And he had a year-long seminar we went. I think we did it 2 years. We'd meet once a month for a day or two.
In person?
Yeah, in person, back in the day. And he would fly into town because he didn't live in I was in Atlanta then, I think. He would fly into town. And what was really interesting is throughout the year, almost every session it went like this. Before he said something really profound, I knew it. But I also knew that if he wasn't there, I wouldn't have known it.
That's this ambient knowledge, right? That's
it was like he would ask questions and he would give us things, and I would be piecing it together while he was talking. And I learned that this is a great way to learn because I never had to accept anything he said, but I was really clear it wasn't because I'd figured it out. I was figuring it out based on what he's doing. That's kind of, I guess, one way I learned to coach.
Yeah, and this also comes in the concept of, we've seen this idea of a dojo that companies building dojos in. It's kind of sounds like what you're talking about. Like Amplio is a kind of dojo.
It is a kind of dojo. I mean, I'm kind of the leader of the dojo, so it's not like we're just a bunch of people learning together. We're actually, interestingly enough, this is what I want to get into now. We're writing a new book on how UX, and we're writing it as a group. And one of the participants actually was a little skeptical. He said, well, as a group, how can we do all this? I said, well, no, don't worry. I would be writing this. I could be writing this by myself. I could be, all this knowledge I've got, I could be putting in, and I will put into the book. What I need the rest of you here for, well, sometimes you get better ideas. Sometimes I miss things. But the other thing is sometimes I don't say it as well as I could. Sometimes I say it wrong. But more important, you can fill in the gaps. I don't have time to write this. And this is what I really wanted to talk about today, because I had this amazing insight a few days ago. And I've done a presentation. If you go again to the playlist I talked about.
On the success engineering work on the site.
Yeah, and then resources, and then YouTube. Under there, one of the playlists says Amplio Community of Practice. This is a free, you join the ACOP and you can actually attend these live. But I just did one, the last one I did, so it'll be at the top of the list, was this case study really. So anyway, so I had the experience how to quickly diagnose challenges. I've had the experience of being able to see what's going on using foundations, fundamentals that are in one playlist there. But I kept seeing all this stuff about you got to run experiments on features. Is the customer going to want this? Is the user going to want this? And I stopped for a moment. I thought, from about 84, 85 to about 2000, I wrote a lot of software, a lot of vertical applications. I mean, a dozen industries. I'm talking about a lot of systems. And until I learned not to put ideas I had in there just because I had them and they were cool. I did do that 2 or 3 times, and I learned, well, those didn't work too much. But there was a process I used. I noticed that I noticed that, wait a moment, I almost never experimented in quick customer features. I knew if it would be useful or not. I did. So I had to, when you get something like this, I love Winston Churchill's comment. Occasionally men stumble across the truth, but occasionally men stumble across the truth, but most of the time they get themselves up, keep walking as if nothing had happened. So I don't do that. So I said, why was I able to do this when other people weren't able to do this? So I thought about that. And first thing I realized is I wasn't always able to do this. Well, I was in the 80s and 90s, but that was only because I was working in a known market with a known customer base. Even when I was building a new product, it was a known customer base. They knew what they were doing manually, and I was sometimes converting it into an automated system, but it was known market, known product.
The salon industry?
Yeah, well, salon industry, it was one of them. Yeah, but that was one. I did a mortgage company. I did a rent a nurse place. Like I said, I did a dozen of these. And I did a retail used camera gear thing, but they had their way of working. They needed it automated. So known market, known. Now, it wasn't just translation, though. That would be good, but it wasn't just that, because computers can do things you can't do very well by hand. So I'm a big fan of Eric Ries and the Startup Way, and his talking about how you got to run experiments and reduce risks and assumptions and things like that. But he's talking about new products, new markets. So in new markets, new products. But let me tell you, most of you all out there, you're not building new products in new markets. You're extending existing. You're fixing bugs you have. The system doesn't work the way you want it to do. So what happened is I looked back on this, and there were 6 steps I took. And this is what's in that seminar I did that's up on the website, not the website, YouTube. First thing I did was I looked to see who were the critical stakeholders and what was value to them and what were the constraints they had. And the second thing is I understood the business the customer was in. I always studied the business. In fact, at one time I was the premier, seriously, one of the premier consultants in the world about how to run hair salons, because I'd gotten partnership with a distributor of hair salon things. And that's what we were trying to do, sell more retail, things of that nature. But there was something else I did that I had thought just had to do with making software simpler. And that was understanding the customer's perspective. How did they look at things? No customer in the world will put 9 after 10 just because the 9 and the 1 line up in a database. No customer in the world would make a distinction between having 1 space or 2 spaces in some information and it doesn't match. No customer in the United States, I'm saying this because we do our dates different than in Europe. If it's September 10th, 24, would put that before 10, 4/23. Where the significant is the year. It's sometimes that's why a lot of things they put dates in the year first. Yeah. Our software is crappy in general, and if you actually look at how developers typically don't pay any attention to this obvious stuff. Like, here's a quick test. If you use PowerPoint, go into view mode and go down about 50 slides in file sorter mode or whatever, and then change the magnification. Now, any human being other than a developer would expect that whatever the slide is in the upper left will stay in the upper left. That's not what happens. In other words, I want to zoom in, but I want to stay where I am. I don't want to zoom in and move some God knows where place. Stuff like this all over the place. The UX is so bad. That's why we had to make a special role. See, the need for a special role of UX is because devs don't do it well. Because they take the system perspective. How are they building things instead of the user perspective? Anyway, what I found, I could write really, really, really easy to use software. I'd been lucky in some projects I was actually the creator of the world's first big scale interactive video disc touchscreen driven system. It was used in Vancouver 86 by IBM and supplied it. I was the contractor to build it for the software for them. It was a translation. It's where I learned a lot of cool things besides, but learned how touch screens worked. Well, Up to this point, these were the 14-inch Panasonic players.
Oh,
Man, really old technology, really big monitors. I was like, I mean, and we'd put kiosks in all over the place, and people could just go up. These are for people who'd never touched a computer before, and I learned how to interact with people who'd never touched a computer before. So I'd always thought my way of doing this, of learning how to do this, made software simpler. But then I realized, wait a moment. In the hair salon business, I'm not going to tell you the details, but something I did in the hair salon business. This was, again, I'm in partnership with this distributor. Basically, in a week, maybe two, I can't remember, but I know it was less than 2 weeks. I created a report that took about 15 minutes of training the salon owner, another 15 minutes for all their managers, and train them all at the same time, and about 5 or 10 minutes for each of the stylists. We didn't change the way they did their work, but the end result of this report was within a week, everyone we did this to, which was over 100 different companies at the time, their retail, their revenue went up on average 9%. And their profit margin went up 4.5%. Added for whatever it was, it's now 4.5. If it was 3, it's now 7.5.
Okay. Yeah, which is doubling.
For those who are barely making money, 4.5% significant.
Yeah.
So it added that margin to it. Now, how did I do that? Well, I knew what their business was. I saw a possibility to change how stylists did retail. In fact, this was one thing that I won't say it was me who made the change. I enabled it with the software, but my partner, when we started doing this and everybody else started saying, wow, look what these guys are doing. They, of course, copied this. It was back in the 90s. I attended to how customers work, so we weren't affecting adversely. So here's the key thing. We changed how all the stylists and, service providers, hair, pedicure, whatever, we changed how they worked like that. There was no J-curve. Why? Because we did it in a way that didn't have to make them work harder and actually made them feel better about what they were doing. And when you do all this, and then, of course, I did have to write code that was easy to change, but I was one of these kind of super programmers, so I knew how to do that. And when the little details, there are always little details at the end you can't possibly imagine. But if you've written your code to conceptually get what's done, those little details shouldn't be a problem. Now, most people, it is a problem because they don't write code well. Why? Because we feel that we can decide. Agile's made it so like, oh, we're not going to impose anything. Well, you know what? You better be following good coding practices and testing practices. Your code's crap. I don't care how much your intention is. This is why I say just mindset. Isn't that so? Anyway, this was what really hit me. Wait a moment. I've been thinking this stuff I did, I don't know, 35 years ago, longer, was all about making easy UX. But when you actually come from how the customer works, understand what they're trying to do, most devs are a lot smarter. I don't mean smarter in general. I've talked about that before, but they have an ability to see better process and better algorithms than people who aren't trained in that. Developers are trained in procedures, how to get something done in a consistent way. This is useful because most people aren't used to that. But they're not trained in observing how people are because we think, well, we're so much smarter here. We're just smarter in general. And that's wrong. We're smarter here and they're smarter. That was
different intelligences about algorithmic observation versus empathic, kind of all that kind of stuff.
All that kind of stuff. I was kind of fortunate, I guess, when I started consulting in the 80s. I'd already been programming for about 15 years, but I got into business consulting, and a lot of the customers, not all of them, but some of the customers had either inadequate or no computer system. And I was always amazed how they could get their job done. I mean, it's like, oh my God, if I was in here manually, you don't want me here manually.
Danger.
Well, Robinson, disaster. So I really respected their knowledge of their business. These were smart people, but they didn't know how to tie it all together. I knew that. So by paying attention to that, I always, when I paid attention to that, like I said, I had a few false starts and I learned not to. And this is a lot of what my coaching workshops are about. How do you talk to customers? How do you discern what's really important? How do you see what they're up to, what their commitment is, and what's in their way with the challenge? But I noticed that I virtually never wrote features unless they came from me without seeing the customer problem. And I learned how to stop doing that quickly. I almost never ran a feature as an experiment. Now, this doesn't mean, again, that I always knew what to do, because there are cases where it's a new market or something. But even then I could do something and know that this is like sometimes I do a mock of things, but mocks don't work well. People are always talking about prototypes. I remember the time I actually mocked up a full report because they kept changing their mind on me. And it was like, and then when I showed it to them, even though it was an example with their data, they said, no, that's not what we want. I said, what the hell happened here? And this is the beauty of Agile. With Agile, you can do a little bit, show a little bit, do a little bit, show a little bit, do a little bit, show a little bit. And it's like tacking a ship, you know, a sailboat.
Well, and this gets down to the basic principles that as the, again, whatever happened, you know, on Mount Snowbird and Star Chamber, this is customer collaboration over negotiated contracts. You know, we're not negotiating a contract over these features, have to do this, as opposed to, hey, people, why don't we sit down and talk? And wouldn't it be nice? Again, I think this is where stuff has gone off the rails, is the idea of, oh, we're just going to shove all the conversation off to a product owner or the business analysts and all that kind of stuff. When really everyone in a strong relational system has a capability to speak with customers in different ways and different contexts for different reasons. And not only, I mean, so this is, I think we're hitting in a principle that has kind of wandered off.
That's right.
And back to a stasis that's not serving the needs of people.
Yeah. Once you got past just a team working individually, I've always disliked the product owner role for a number of reasons. But the one you just alluded to, that in most cases, the product owner is in the way between the developers and the customer. So the developers never intricately understand the nature of the customer. I go just the opposite. Again, I'll give you the hair salon example, because I was there for a couple of years. So that was the one I did the most of. And there's some very interesting stories I have there. But one of the things I did is, so I was both the CIO and CTO, CIO of my partner company, because I knew more about computers and the other people there. So I became the CIO of, it was a small group. I think we had 7, 8 developers, and I could tell they were kind of out of touch. And in fact, the way they got into the IT room was from the back parking lot, so they could actually get to where they worked without ever having to walk through any of the play offices where our customers, the people, the staff of this distributor was. So they were very isolated, and they liked being isolated. And I could tell early on this was a serious problem. There was the people they were supporting felt disenfranchised. I knew these people didn't understand what was going on. They would always talk these stories about how the customers were stupid and didn't know how to use the system. See,
I need 10T or
yeah, it's kind of like, see, this is what we're talking about in this new workshop I'm coming up. You could think of, here's what the customers know how to work, and here's what the system does. And the disparity between what people expect and what the system does causes a lot of conflict, causes a lot of misunderstanding, causes a lot of, oh my God, this isn't doing my job. I lose faith. I lose faith in the system. And, people, the developers, then try to get these people to come over to them, but that takes a lot of training. And then the developers are often arrogant. They don't know how to use the system, and oh goodness, it doesn't help. The trick is to write software in an intuitive way. See, it takes a little time to do this, but it mostly takes a mind shift to do this. And most people don't even know this is a problem. They just blame it on the customers. And this is, and you say, oh, well, the agile mindset talks about, no, maybe it mentions it's like buy low, sell high. It doesn't give you how. It doesn't give you the mechanisms. And that's what I'm saying is needed. And that is not easy, and not something you're going to learn in a 2-day workshop. I didn't learn this in any workshop, but I did learn it from other people. And the way I learned it from other people, there was a company that was owned by Fernando Flores, Action Technologies. I've forgotten their name. Yeah, it was Action Technologies. They don't exist now. But they had created some amazing software that I was also promoting. And I watched what they did, and they did what I'm talking about. I learned it from them. And it hit me how they were doing it. It hit me that people create reality in their own conversation, what I call their listening, or Fernando called it that. the conversation that's going on in your head. And if you don't know what I mean, it's that questioning you just had. What the hell does he mean by the conversation? That's
who's
the
that?
conversation.
Who's that self that you're talking to?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And when you start attending to that, and you ask questions, and you just also even ask, why would somebody say what they're saying? And you can ask them questions. But when you come from their perspective, you know if something's going to work because you understand their business. You understand what's important. You understand how they're going to react to it. And this can be known in, again, I put the caveat, known market, known customer base, and 90% of what's out there is this way. I've gone into dozens of companies and talked to thousands of people, and most people are working on enhancing existing products, not creating totally new, unheard of, never done before products.
Yeah, large banks, large insurance companies, large manufacturing concerns, whatever it is that the vast majority of information technology professionals are doing in the world, yet you're not in the new product development thing. And I think so there's that. The other thing that this is, and that you're naturally saying this, and this is a pattern that you're naturally doing when you're in either the salon environment or whichever the mortgage environment, all those environments, what you're doing is seeking first to understand, right?
That's
I
right.
mean, this is Covey
Duh.
back in 1989.
Thank you.
Duh, people. And this is also the thing. Well, just because I know the 7 habits, this is the propositional knowledge of the 7 habits. That is a whole other ball game of actually, be proactive. Okay. Begin with the end in mind. But first things first, think. I mean, so I can well, I love it. I mean, I grew up into the professional world on it.
I did too.
But these but these are things. They are principles of, again, has 7 habits of highly effective people. What does effectiveness mean? I mean, we are still talking about organizational effectiveness. 30 years after that, and we were talking about it 50 years before. So these are, I think, this is also goes into the first principles. Right?
I just want to point out what you just did to me is what I'm talking about. You brought up this explicit statement of tacit knowledge I had. I've read Covey's 7 Habits and other Covey's book. I've even been in a Covey seminar. But you know what? I'll admit, I never connected the dots to 7 habits to what I was doing. But it's obvious that's what I'm doing. It was obvious to you. It wasn't obvious to me. Now it's obvious to me. So I just learned something that I have years of experience in. I've just learned how to connect the dots to it. And this will help my writings. I mean, I'm going to do something that explains how this is just a manifestation of the 7 habits. So the thing here is, this is my assertion, and this is maybe the spice you were talking about. I might want it to go, but I am learning. I am trying to learn to be more positive on things. So Agile, if you look at the Agile space, and I looked at LinkedIn, just go on and look at LinkedIn and look at all the comments about that you see related to improvement. And you'll see one of 3 types, I think. One is you'll see some people denying we have a problem. Okay, well, just forget about Agile, not Agile. Forget that conversation. You see a lot of people giving advice on how to solve problems. Okay, a lot of that. And some of that is blaming management or other things like that. You see a lot of people giving some good ideas. That's positive. But what you don't see very much of, you'll see it if you read my stuff, and you'll see it if you read some of the people's stuff I mentioned before, is people who are wondering, why do we have all these sinking ships? Instead of how to fix the holes in the boat, and instead of discussing if we can find it with a well-defined method, or do we have to wait and let the ship sink and then figure out what would have saved it?
Postmortem.
Why don't we figure out how to make ships that don't have holes in the boat? By the way, a simple side note, in terms of is there a well-defined? Well-defined does not mean deterministic. People misunderstand that. Don Reinertson wrote something for me back in 2009 about this, which explains the difference. You can have a well-defined method, but that doesn't mean you're not thinking as you go and getting feedback. That's why I love his book, Principles of Product Development Flow, 2nd Generation Lean Product Development. There are 4 books I recommend, and that's one of them. That one is about what to do, how things work. There's another one, oddly enough, you might think, is a Stoic book book on Stoicism by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. And that's kind of how to be with problems. Very powerful. The obstacles that show up are actually our guidance, our pathway. We got to go through those obstacles. Then I like The Choice by Ellie Goldratt, because that's critical thinking. That's how to think. So you have how to be, how to think, what to do. And then Timeless Way Building by Chris Alexander, because he talks about how to design large systems that people think are not quite designable. And most everything I've seen in every framework, I will say this, every framework I've seen violates the systems thinking proposed by Alexander. It's either this top down big thing or putting together by pieces, and you combine the two, you're still doing it wrong. You've got to look at the flow, the values. Anyway, going off.
Sub optimization. Yeah.
So I highly recommend those of you who are a little intrigued, you want to see this case study, go to the YouTube channel I talked about. If you just follow me, and if you can't find it, send me a note. I'll put it on my actually what I'll do is the LinkedIn post you have is where the live stream is going to come from, right?
Yeah, there's one with the stream, and then did you want to put up the post that you shared with me before the session, or?
Well, here, this is the case study.
Yeah, because I did post that in the chat on LinkedIn and YouTube.
Okay, good. Well, that's the case study write-up, and this was I wrote, and I should link from the case study. I just realized I don't link to the video. But I'll add that link there. I'll add the link to the video. But you can find the video easily enough. Just again, go to successengineering.org, which you got. Take resources on the right. Yeah, actually, go to presentations. It's right up there. It's eye-opening, because the mindset is very important. That coming from first seek to understand, then do something, be proactive. And we're not doing that in the Agile space. And so all these problems, here's my assertion, and I have evidence for it. My assertion is the reason the Agile space is stagnating is because people don't know what to do. And it's not just about mindset. It's like, I just posted something this morning. Deming would talk about it's not enough to do your best. You have to know what to do. Doing your best, maybe think of that's the Agile mindset. Knowing what to do, that's this physics of flow. You've got to learn this stuff. And the reason it's so hard to learn now is the training methods we use and the incredible cost to it. $10,000. Yeah, I can appreciate you don't have $10,000. $1,000? No, I'm sorry. That's different. And that's what I'm trying to do is demonstrate that it's possible to learn a vast amount of information over 6 months at your own pace, when you can access your own knowledge. And okay, this is an experiment. It's never been done before, but it follows all the theory and science of education and learning and business consulting. And it's not my ideas. It's a collaboration, a combination, an integration of hundreds of other people's ideas that I've integrated into the system. So this isn't the ALS framework. It's basically a thought process, like learning how to do physics instead of learning how to build separate kinds of bridges. Anyway, I know we're a few minutes past it. Well, I'm happy. I don't have a quick cutoff.
But no, but that's I think the idea is that, well, you've gotten this experience, you know this stuff. Those of you out there, you don't have to go learn it again.
Yeah, that's
on
right.
your own. Oh, you know, now let Al be your guide through this.
And guide is. I've always thought of it as a guide, but it's actually not quite the same, because see, a guide who's teaching you, kind of a mentor. See, I think what I'm actually creating is a mentoring program. It's not a one-on-one, but you got a lot of opportunity to interact with me. A mentoring program, but at self-study prices, whereas mentoring would otherwise be expensive. Believe me, I'm an expensive mentor. But because I can use techniques that weren't around before, Zoom and live sessions.
Yeah.
I can mentor that way. And I think this is the future. I think, and one last thing, because I did say things were going to get worse. I said for 2 reasons, but I didn't ever give the second reason. So there's a cliff coming that I don't think people want to acknowledge. And what that cliff is because of the space we're in with Agile, because we haven't educated managers and executives, they are already, it's obvious, getting disenchanted with like team leads, coaches, scrum masters, things like that. AI is coming up. If I was a manager where with what I know, if I was a manager with what most managers know and executives with what most managers know, I would think AI is going to answer to my problem. For like almost no money, I can have people say, hey, go do Chat GPT and figure out what the cause of this problem is. Why do I need to pay a scrum master this amount of money when I could just have my people look at the problems? Now, the answer is not going to get their answer. I didn't say that this will work.
Well, yeah, there's some examples of you garbage in, garbage out,
But
right?
because, yeah, most of the stuff I'm talking about isn't out there for Chat GPT to bring in. The stuff that I've learned that's really good, that's in my program and other people use, and there are some unique things in my program, but the good stuff, even that's widespread, you go do Chat GPT on it, you won't find it. When you ask for it, you get the mainstream mediocre results. So management, when they're pushed with budgets, are going to start cutting people more. I think we've barely seen the surface of this. Now, it's going to be a bad thing. I'm not saying they should.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is the good thing is, and what I'm also providing as an alternative to them is, see, I think the people doing the work need to get smarter at it instead of hiring outside consultants to do it. And that's harsh maybe to say for those of you who want to be outside consultants. But if you want to be an outside consultant, then raise your game.
Yeah.
Raise your game so you can talk to people in a way they don't have to reinvent. You don't have to run experiments. Show them how they can know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
That would double, triple, 10 times your value and very inexpensive. So outside consultants need to raise the bar. And if we're going to be at this mediocre level, then an inexpensive way to even raise that is just train internal people. And that's what I'm working on.
And the people you're invested in, again, if you are running a going concern and you are generating revenue and your sales are driving your ability to pay for costs and all that kind of stuff, that you want to invest for people in the long term.
That's right.
In general, and that when you're, and Peter Block goes into this in the consulting model.
Yes.
Are you paying for a pair of hands, or are you paying for someone to be your trusted advisor?
That's right.
You're paying for this kind of experience to say, all right, have you thought of this? Well, let's think of this together. Let's explore this way, because I think based on what you're telling me, your problem is in this area, and let's go into more of this area and observe and reflect and do all those kinds of things. And that's a whole different ball game.
It is.
Than either A, being a pair of hands, is, hey, I'm your scrum master. What you impose scrum, I don't care. I don't, whatever you do, say scrum master, whatever, I'll do the gig. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Or you were hired as a consultant. There's these three tiers that Block talks about. There's the pair of hands, there's the trusted advisor, and then there's this line manager hiring you to say, I need you to do what I was doing and do it in the way that I would do it. It's kind of like the pair of hands, but these are these three tiers. And it sounds like what you're saying is that for those who wish to be engaging as consultants, that to up your game to be this trusted advisor. And how do you become that is you have to have an opinion.
Well, that brings up two issues. Yeah. See, like as a consultant, part of my program is I give all the slides that I use and all the PowerPoint, not PowerPoints. Well, I give all those, but I mean also the Lucid Spark board and all that. Those are tools that you get while you're in the program to use, because part of an outside consultant should be raising the bar for all the people who are internal. This brings up one last point I just realized in this conversation. We talk about the people close to the work know more about the work. This is what Agile is. Those people doing the work know more about the work. But look at what's happened. We bring all these consultants in who don't know the work. They don't know the company. They don't know what's going on. And yeah, maybe they're more experienced, and yes, maybe they're smarter. I'm not disputing that. And the problem is, though, if they bring a solution, like whatever it is, Scrum, Less, Safe, I don't care, then they're bringing a solution to this. They're not creating a collaborative response effort. When I was a consultant, when I did that a lot, I would always collaborate with people. I didn't have a set solution. I do this GPS I talked about, and we figure it out. But it's interesting. This is where frameworks are killing Agile, because these are prescribed solutions. And yeah, there's variation in them, but it's still saying you work this way, and you have cross-functional teams, which are hard to get across a large organization. There are always some special skills, or You need to plan ahead a week or two with sprints, but that's hard to do if you're in a situation where you get interrupted or you're doing maintenance or there are unknowns and you can't plan out. Anyway,
But
what I'm saying,
Al, if you've got the McKinsey playbook or the Accenture playbook, I mean,
right,
then they'll tell you, okay, so there's this agile, the Scrum thing, the safe thing. You all put them together in this playbook and run this play because you did that. You did when you were playing football in college. Hey, you can
Yeah.
do that, and it's gonna run. You're Peyton Manning, and that just it is snake oil. It is snake oil.
It is snake oil. But here's then the bottom line.
Mhm.
Those people who are close to the work, what if you can educate them very inexpensively? What if you educated them in a way where it cost almost nothing in terms of time or dollars? See, this is my experiment, except I'm seeing some success, and I know it can happen. Why? Because I'm using known techniques. I am creating actually some new training techniques. It is my program runs on an ongoing basis. So the problem of how do people come into the middle of it and get started when it's already ongoing, but we fix that. I've been trying to figure this out for like months. And last week we came up with an onboarding process, and we're still, refining the method so people can come on, because it really is an ongoing education system, and how to think. So to me, if you think about it, so if there's any manager out there, some manager of yours and you'd like them to support you more, you're an employee, say, imagine this, if they're going to bring in a consultant for the cost of half a day of a consultant, half a day, or let's say the full day, 1 day less of consultant can get 2 people trained to know all this stuff and how to train other people in knowing all this stuff. So if you need the immediate need, great, bring a consultant in who can guide you, but have them start 1 day later, so 2 other people can be learning this while that person's in there. Now, you talked about the different levels of people. Managers, if you give people ongoing education as part of their job, and $1,000 is not a lot. And actually, it's then you have to continue getting the materials if you want to, that you can extend it every 6 months for 800. But the point is, that is such a appreciated gesture to people to educate them, and they will stay loyal with that.
And I think that this is the key to, and we're talking about that there's a person. So I'm in position with financial authority. So my decision is, okay, do I spend $1,000 on per person on 3 people to go to CSPO or CSM and whatever for 2 days, and then come back and be individual, sub-optimized thing people, right, in nodes in this human system, and then that knowledge kind of dissipates? Or do I say take someone internally and invest $1,000, even say annual over time, and that person is in a regular program, that they are a beacon of knowledge for that team and others, and they continue to be involved and bring new stuff and bring different challenges and help others learn the patterns and do the thinking. And that is a much smarter investment. I mean, it's kind of like this, am I going to hire an agile coach? Maybe maybe this is part of it. An internal agile coach, think of all the trainings you have to take to be a credentialed agile coach, and depending, even if those things exist, because maybe they don't, because really we're talking about value, or do I take someone who wasn't agile coach, whatever, put them through and they enroll in the ACE program, right? They become a consultant educator, right? So they can consult and educate, and again, be this beacon of knowledge and this resource for others. So, and this is, I think, what you're saying is that you spend $1,000, you get 10 times the result of spending $3,000 or $10,000 to get knowledge that will essentially dissipate over time.
Let me leave people with a different question, because what I'm really trying to do is not so much sell you on the ACE program, although obviously I am trying to sell you on the ACE program, but that's not my real point. Okay. My real point is this, and this is something to step back and reflect, and a question to ask yourself. If you're a manager, you'll ask it one way. If you're an individual looking to the future and wanting to get in charge, is what would it be like? How do I either get people on my staff this way, or how do I personally do this, get educated in a relatively short period of time. Okay, 6 months isn't that short, but it's like they say the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Well, the best time to have learned this stuff is maybe 6 months ago. The best time to learn it, second best time is today. Is don't worry about ACE. Don't worry about Amplio. Don't worry about me. Maybe you don't like me. Maybe you don't like my approach and all that. But ask yourself this. There's this vast body of knowledge out there already that you're not going to get with ChatGPT because it's the mediocre, low quality stuff just overwhelms it out in the space. I've mentioned a half a dozen people already who have this body of knowledge. How do I, over the next several months, get this? And take that as a homework assignment. Take that as something to think about. There are all these people who know all this stuff. How do I get it myself? Now, some of you will think that's not possible, and you'll be hearing people who tell you it's not possible. And I'm telling you, don't listen to those people. They have a vested interest in lots of expensive training to give you and a lot of consulting to give you. And I'm saying that's not necessary. So don't get it from me, but look to see how to get it. Now, you might be the type of person who self-learns. Great. Go ahead and do self-study. Read books. I've gave you 4. There's an awful lot of good online stuff, but don't take solutions. Don't take these canned programs that give you a bunch of solutions. Find, I don't even know there is any of this, but go look for it. That gives you self-study, how to solve problems. I mean, that's what I do with all the videos I record. I got hundreds of hours of that too. But take it on as, am I going to do this? Now, if you're the type of person that wants to learn, or if you're a manager who has somebody that's that type of person, then figure out a program and do it. There is no reason for, well, there are reasons, but they're not good reasons. There's no reason that we should be reinventing the wheel when knowing how to improve our process, knowing how to see if a feature is useful or not when I've got a known market and a known product. There's no reason to be hitting the walls. And there's no reason that there's all this resistance. And there's no reason management doesn't understand. There's no reason executives don't understand. We're not talking their language. So figure that out, because those of you who don't are going to be not in a good shape in a couple of years. Because, whether it's good or not that people go use AI for all this stuff, when you get fired, you don't care if you got fired for a good reason or a bad reason. You got fucking fired.
Ain't that the truth?
I mean, it's this way. Excuse my language. So you gotta take reality. Now, some of you are just going to be in hope, and that's fine, but you got pain coming, in my opinion. And everyone that is motivated to learn, I think, can do this. I want to end this with one quote, because I love this quote. This is the Stoic book, comes from the Stoic book. I've got "The obstacle is the way." I know it sounds funny to be a book on Stoicism.
But, this book is hugely popular in many domains.
And it's good. It's been good for me for 2 reasons. I know I'm not saying I'm not reactive at points, but you should have seen me years ago. So it's helped me calm down. So one thing it's good about, it is good about learning how to be more stoic, more disengaged from things that engage you. But the other thing is, it actually has helped me hugely figure out what to do. And this is a quote from Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor. Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. I want to be clear. I'm not being a doomsayer with all this stuff. I'm saying the path to see what to do, though, is being illuminated by what looks like a problem. Well, it is a problem. That's our obstacle, but we go through it. We don't go around it. We don't pretend it's not there. And the mechanisms are out there. So, but you look and see, and you take the path you want to take, because you know your situation, and I don't know your situation. Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, we ran over a little bit, but I'm really glad we did. Thanks for bearing with some of my ranting here a little bit too. But I think the possibility, I think this inflection point in the industry 2 or 3 years from now, we can come out in a much better situation. I think it's going to take a couple of years. We can come out
Amen.
much better than we are. We saw Agile improve things, and now it's stagnating to some level. It's not dead. I've never said it's dead, by the way. It's not going what it could be. But we will come out stronger. And those people who lead the coming out stronger will do better than those people who wait for it to adversely affect them. There's
Don't
always
wait.
opportunity. A door closes, a new one opens up. The last thing by Emerson. Now, like all times, is a good time if you know what to do. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Love these.
Thank you for being here, Al. And this is fantastic. Again, I'll put you in the penalty box and say bye to everybody. Thank you so much for the precious gift of your time and attention. That was This Week in Al. This Week in Amplio. This Week in Amplio. Al Shalloway. My name is Ryan Erickson. Thank you again for being here and engaging with us. See you next week.